Hello. So, if you've ever seen a video card before, you'll probably notice that something's a little off about this one. That's because I've disassembled this one for painting. I'm currently working on a Ryzen build, and I decided, hey, it'd be cool if I could take the GPU shrouds off and paint them. So, for this particular video card, the NVIDIA GTX 1060, Gigabyte brand, and the WindForce model, I didn't see a disassembly video, so I figured I'd just make one. So, unfortunately, I already have it apart, so I can't show you specifically how to get it out and apart by actually doing it. But you should be able to get the gist of how to, since it is fairly simple. You will probably need, some sort of technical experience as far as taking basic electronics apart and know how to handle them. But other than that, it's pretty much just a screwdriver and some patience. But it took me all of 10 minutes, but it was mostly just trying to not break anything. So, what you're going to want to do and start out with is a Phillips screwdriver. Or you can get a flathead if you prefer it. That actually worked a little better for me. Something small and decently strong, so it's not going to snap off if you're come across a screw that doesn't come apart as easy, which there were a couple of these on here. So you're going to want to start actually just like this. Just lay the GPU out on its bottom. And there's going to be 4 screws to get the top piece off. So if you'll notice those blue looking things on the bottom, I've actually covered these tabs in painter's tape because I'm about to go head out and paint them. All right. So there's going to be 2 screws right here into the heatsink. So you can go ahead and remove those 2. And I'll take the fans out so you can see that there are 2 more on the other side. There'll be one right here and one right here, and they will be into, you can see, right in there on the other side, in this way, horizontally. So you'll just take those 4 screws out, and at that point, this thing will be completely loose except for the end. Unfortunately, this GPU has 2 pegs at the end, so the cowl comes completely around. You'll notice if you have this exact GPU, which it looks cool, but it does present a little bit of a problem. So you'll notice there's 2 pegs right there, and on the other side there are also 2 pegs. So what you're going to have to do is either hold it flat like this, or hold it on its side with 2 hands, and slowly wiggle this thing until both of these pop out. So mine came out with a little bit of force, but it wasn't enough to break anything, so that was good. So I wouldn't, crank on this thing too much, and you might snap something off. But as long as you hold it right here and kind of just keep working at it, it only took me maybe a minute or 2 to get it off. So it should pop off. There's no glue holding it in place. It's just a plastic peg inside of those holes. So once you get this piece off, there will be this cable connected to the 2 fans. So when you have this thing flipped over, it'll look like this. Let me get some more light here. And this cable will be coming up into 2 spaces here. So one right there, and there's another one right there. So the cable runs through there and up into here, and all it is just a holder just to keep the cable in place. So all you have to do is, when the fans are in here, is unplug the smaller end connector out of these 2. There'll be another one for the other fan. It's kind of like a Y connector, so one goes into here and one goes into here, and all you have to do is just wiggle those out. And at that point, you just pull the cable up out of those guides and your top will come completely off. So the next phase, if you're not planning on painting the fans, which I've heard is not extremely good idea. I'm not sure how true it is, but I've heard that if you paint fans, especially ones that are pretty light like these, you can come up to with issues with weight, at just the added weight of the paint, and also you're disrupting kind of the natural surface that these are designed, for airflow. But I don't know. I mean, you can go ahead and try it, I guess, if you're not, too afraid you're brazen. But I'm not going to paint these anyway because I want the black to contrast with the white color that I'm doing. So once you get the cables unhooked, next thing you're going to want to do is remove the fans. So the fans are extremely easy to get off. All you're going to need to have is the screwdriver you're using will have to be pretty thin because you're going to sit the screwdriver down through the fan blades, and there's these, if you'll notice, these 3 screws right here on each fan. So all you have to do is pop those 6 screws out, and it'll take both of the fans out. There's nothing else holding them in place besides that. And at that point, the top is completely disassembled. So the top is slightly easier to get apart than the bottom, but it's still not that huge of a deal to get the bottom off, as long as you're careful. It's actually a lot easier if you plan to take the heatsink off. If you want to do a complete disassembly, say you're planning to apply new thermal paste for whatever reason, or you just want to disassemble it, then it's a lot easier because to get the back cover off, the plastic plate, you do have to take all the screws out that hold the heatsink in, basically. So at that point, this is freely moving. So what you're going to have to do if you don't want to do that and you're just looking to get the plate off and paint it or whatever, I would suggest at this point you're going to want to flip it over. But you will see as soon as you start taking the screws out, if they're all out, the heatsink is very heavy, so it's going to drop down in that space where it's not even with whatever surface that you're working on. So I just used, for example, just an old photo album, since it was squishy and kind of the right height and it was just laying around. You're going to want to place it down like this on top of whatever you're going to use here. And then you'll notice the heatsink is pretty evenly spaced out, so you should be able to work without any problem disconnecting from the PCB. So moving along, there are 8 screws that hold the back plate in. 6 of them, these 4, and these 2 hold heatsinks in. So forewarning, if you don't want them to come off, you will have to pay attention. The other 2, on the other hand, though, are quite easy. They're just, that's actually the screws right there, the other 2. They're very short, and one of them on mine was actually kind of loose, so it was pretty easy to get out. But the placement, let me take this off here. Placement of those 2 screws, this one right here that has kind of copper ring around it, and also the other one right here has the copper ring around it. That's how you know which ones to take out. On the other side, so this one is more difficult. Sorry about the focus there. This camera's not extremely good at autofocusing. You can still see it though. So it's underneath the copper pipe, so you might have to get a really thin screwdriver to get in there, but mine was already loose, so it came out pretty easily. And the other one right there was even easier to come out. So once you get those 2 out, those 2 go through there, up out the back, and into the plate. So they screw in one right there and one right up there. So the other 6 screws, 4, these ones here are more difficult, so I'd recommend doing these 2 first. And these two hold in what I believe is the heatsink for the video memory. And you can actually see up underneath the main heatsink, there's a smaller heatsink in there. And it is attached with the two screws, but it's also kind of glued on, or it's some sort of thermal tape that's pretty sticky. So mine didn't fall off when I took the two screws out. If you're really worried about it, you could stick, something in there, obviously not metal or anything, maybe a pencil or something that would fit in between that gap. That gap right there that would hold that on if you are worried about it coming off. Like I said, mine didn't come off or anything, and I was moving this thing around while the screws were out, so it seems to be in there decently well with that thermal tape. So once you get those two out, the last step is to get these four out. So those four hold the main heatsink on to the PCB and the GPU itself. So the screws are fairly simple to get out too, but they are spring-loaded. So what that means is when they come out, I'd place a finger, over the top of it so that you're not, springing across the room and losing it. They're not extremely spring-loaded. It's not really strong, so I'm not sure if they would spring up or out or anything, but it's just a good measure just to make sure that you're not losing anything. So I would also recommend doing it in kind of like a tire fashion, or, if you're taking a wheel off a car, do diagonals, just in case, since they are spring-loaded, you're not having this thing lift up all weird. So, do across from each other while you take it off. And once you get those four screws off, the next step, if you are completely disassembling, is continue to disassemble from there. Pull. It might take a little bit of force to get the heatsink off. I haven't actually done it, but I've seen people take apart GPUs, and they do require a little bit of prying to get, just hand prying, not any tools or anything, but to separate the PCB from the heatsink, because the glue is pretty strong and everything, and if there's any thermal tape in there. But if you're going to do that, that's great. If you're not wanting to do that, and you don't want to have to worry about taking it apart and maybe reapplying thermal paste or anything, you're just trying to get the pieces off to paint or whatever you're trying to do. At this point, once you remove this, I would immediately take the screws and screw back in both the video memory heatsink and also the main heatsink itself. Because if you leave this like this, there's a possibility that it's going to slide, it's going to move around, it might even come off completely, and then you will have to take it apart and see if there was any problems caused, and maybe even reapply thermal paste and whatnot. So since I wasn't planning on doing that, I put the screws back in, and what you have is mostly disassembled and all the plastic removed, so I can go take it outside and I can spray it whatever color I'm wanting to do, which, for instance, I'm going to use white for my build. But that's pretty much it for the Gigabyte WindForce GTX 1060, the 6GB version. I'm not sure if it's different as far as size or anything. I wouldn't see why it is, but there's a possibility. But yeah, it's fairly simple. As long as you know a little bit about taking electronics apart, proper handling, and not touching things with static or dirty hands or anything like that. It's basically just a screwdriver and a little bit of time. But you will, after you paint it, you will achieve some pretty cool results. If you take the time to do a proper paint job and whatnot. I've seen some pretty cool projects from other people. So that's pretty much it. If you have any other questions, maybe you're running into an issue with this particular GPU, or maybe another GPU, I may not be able to help you 100%, but I have taken other things apart and stuff like this, so it's fairly easy. But yeah, so cool. Thanks for your time. Like I said, have any questions, feel free to comment below, like, subscribe, and have a good one. Good luck with your project.